Let's pick up in verse 36. And in verse 36 to 43, we have the interpretation. I'll simply read it and make a few comments from your notes. You, O king, are a king of kings. Now we know that there's only one ultimate king of kings. But again, Nebuchadnezzar ruled, and the reason that the dream had him as the head of gold, gold is, of course, the most priceless of the metals that are mentioned. And so he's called a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. Now you would think that this would humble him a little bit. I didn't get this because I'm super smart. I didn't get it because I'm a great military commander. I didn't get it because of all of my battlefield brilliance. I got it because God gave me. Instead, as we're going to find out in the next chapter, he gets a big head about it. And he builds the image that he saw in his dream, and now he wants everyone to bow down to it. And God's going to have to deal with him for that arrogance. Verse 38, wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. So remember, the image was in the form of a man. The head was gold, and then the chest and arms were silver. The torso was bronze, and then the legs were iron. The feet were iron mixed with clay. We'll see all of this in just a moment. Verse 39, after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. That's going to be the Medo-Persian Empire. I've listed all of these for you. The gold represents Babylon, the silver Medo-Persian Empire. And then after the kingdom that's inferior another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. This is the kingdom of Alexander. You know, Alexander didn't last very long. Alexander came on the scene, or came to prominence, at the age of 20. When Alexander conquered the Medo-Persian Empire, he went into battle with 50,000 troops. The Persians had 250,000 people on the battlefield. And thanks to Alexander, as we read our New Testament, we realize that our New Testament was written in one of the most clear and explicit languages that the world has ever known. It was called the Koine Greek. Koine coming from the word common, it became the common language throughout the world. And the reason that it developed was, as Alexander pulled his forces together, you remember that there were several different Greek states, and those different Greek states spoke different languages. In order to command these troops, he had to have a language so that when he spoke, they would know exactly what he wanted to do. And when he went into his first battle, his greatest battle really, against the Medo-Persian Empire, he pulled off a military maneuver that is still studied to this day. And it required a precise understanding on the part of all of his troops as to exactly what was going to happen. But this is the kingdom of Alexander. And then, of course, verse 40, the fourth kingdom will be strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, iron being the strongest of these metals. Like iron that crushes, the kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. And so this, of course, we know to be the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire had phenomenal military might. They had, however, perpetual administrative problems. In this area, they were not as strong as the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar and, to a lesser extent, the kingdom of Alexander. Verse 41, whereas you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. So what we're talking about now is the revived Roman Empire. And this is the empire that will be established by Antichrist. This empire, I believe, is already in the formation stages. We see it actually developing. It's impossible for us at this point to pick out the 10 toes. The 10 toes, as you'll remember from the book of Revelation and even later in Daniel, the 10 toes represent 10 kingdoms. And then 3 of those kingdoms are uprooted by another king, and this king will be the Antichrist. He will take over the control of those kingdoms, and he will reign over the world really with a fist of iron, and it will be a horrible, horrible time to be alive. I want you to notice that the clay and the ceramic, the iron and the ceramic clay in verse 43 says, they will mingle with the seed of men. I want you to think about that little phrase. Who are they? Whoever they are, they're not men. They will mingle with the seed of men. I believe what we're going to see in the coming of Antichrist is, and I truly think that we're seeing it already worldwide, we are seeing an influx of fallen angel activity, demonic activity like we have never, ever seen before. So the toes of iron mixed with clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, and I think it's something on the equivalent of what we saw back prior to the flood. We're going to see the mingling, whatever form that takes, whether it's simply working together, a physical infiltration of the human race. He doesn't tell us here, he simply lets us know, but notice they will not adhere to one another just as iron does not mix with clay. Ultimately, this whole experiment is going to collapse and self-destruct. Verse 44, in the days of these kings. So here we are living in this history. How close we are to the rapture of the church, the tribulation period, we don't know, but it has to be close. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So here we're talking about the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Verse 45, inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. How many passages do we have where Jesus is called the stone? He is the rock of our salvation in the Psalms. He is the rock that followed the children of Israel through the wilderness, 1 Corinthians 10:4. He is the rock that is a stumbling stone to the unbeliever, but it's the stone on which anyone who falls will turn to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So he's referred to as the stone in many, many different ways and places. All right, verse 45 concludes then, it broke in pieces, the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold. He works his way up the image from the feet. The great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain and its interpretation is sure. What Daniel has just done is laid out a schematic, if you will, or a diagram of history from 500 BC until eternity future. There are things that are not included. The church age is not included. There are things that have been revealed from the time of the apostles that Daniel was not aware of. But even for Daniel, what he knows at this point is very little compared to what he's going to know at the end of chapter 11 and 12, because God is going to continue to give more and more information. In verse 46 to 49, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Daniel, by the way, you'll remember, always turned away any recognition. Again and again and again, he stated, these dreams are not revealed to me because of anything in me, because I'm greater than any other person. But you can't stop people from doing what they want to do. And so here they give this offering to him. I'm sure he was not at all pleased with it. Verse 47, the king answered Daniel and said, truly your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings. Now that's a wonderful thing to say. But in the next chapter, we'll see next week, he turns right around and continues with his inflated head and his puffed up idea about who he is and what power he has. And God's, of course, going to break that in chapter 4. And as Nebuchadnezzar says here, your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, a revealer of secrets. Since you could reveal his secret, we need to bear in mind that God was doing this not just for the salvation of Nebuchadnezzar. He was doing it for the millions, and I believe millions, as a result of Nebuchadnezzar's salvation, came to the knowledge of the Redeemer of Israel, and many, many millions were saved during this time. By the way, these messages that Daniel gave would have passed into the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and the Roman Empire. So they were passed down over and over again. By the way, in Matthew 2, why did the Magi, who came from the east, how did they know that the Savior was coming? Well, we're going to find out right at the end here, and I'll read it for you. Verse 48, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. The empire of Babylon was divided into various provinces. The province immediately around Babylon was called Babylon. Daniel is put in charge of that province. He is second only to King Nebuchadnezzar, just as Joseph was to Pharaoh. And it says he became the chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. he began to teach them, so that for 500 years there were always believers among these wise men, even after the Medo-Persians took over, even after Greece took over, even after Rome took over. The message kept coming down until finally in Matthew 2, they showed up and they asked a question: where is he who is born the King of the Jews? Verse 49, also Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. The gate was the place where basically the rulers of the land would sit. People would bring their problems, people would bring their requests, their complaints, whatever. If they had law cases to solve, they would bring them to the gate. To be the chief sitting in the gate would be the equivalent of probably our chief of the Supreme Court, our Chief Justice. That was the position that Daniel held. But isn't it interesting? He didn't forget his friends. Daniel petitioned the king for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they who were in the background, but they who faithfully prayed, they played a very big part in God revealing the message to Daniel. So here's a little lesson. When God promotes you, don't forget those who helped you get promoted. So we end with a tale of two rulers. One is Daniel, now a ruler in Babylon, and the other is Nebuchadnezzar. What's the difference between the two? One is exalted by God and humbles himself. One has been exalted by God and he tries to use it to promote himself. God doesn't take kindly when we take his gifts for ourselves. We need to remember this. Humility and arrogance are the ultimate issues of everyday life. Humility will always lead us to faith. Arrogance will always lead us off track. Stay small, stay humble. As the Psalm says, I would rather be a doorkeeper in the temple of God than to be among the mansions of the great. To be a doorkeeper, to be a servant, to just play a humble part.